Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. Today I'm joined by my friend Jonathan Duarte, longtime innovator in the HR tech space and founder of GoHire. Jonathan has been building and scaling recruiting technologies since the 90s. And in this conversation, we explore where conversational AI, recruiting automation, and responsible hiring are headed next. From viral chatbot experiments in libraries to building agents that act like co-pilots for recruiters, Jonathan shares insights on everything from the evolution of candidate engagement to the ethical design of AI systems. We also dig into candidate fraud, resume inflation, and why referrals still rule when it comes to quality of hire. Thanks for listening, and get ready for a candid, fast-paced discussion about what's broken in hiring and what AI might actually fix. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I'm speaking with my friend Jonathan Duarte from GoHire. How you doing today, Jonathan?
Great. Excited to be on.
Yeah, good to have you. I know we talked about this a while ago, probably before this show even launched, and it took us a while. But I know you've been a busy guy and definitely want to hear about all the things going on in your world. Why don't we just start with you just giving the audience a overview of your background and the impetus for starting Go Hire.
Yeah, so I've been in the HR recruiting tech space since '96 when I built one of the first job boards, then built a lot of the underlying technology and job distribution platforms. And then after I sold out most of that stuff, I started another company. I wasn't the founder, but I was on the founding team of a company called GoHire, a small, medium-sized background screening company, and did the go-to-market and a lot of the APIs, integrations to job boards and whatnot. Then moved over and started GoHire kind of on a whim because we did a test with one of my friends, and we literally just sat in a library. I'm not joking. We brought in like two laptops and big screens into the Mountain View Library here in Northern California, and just said, "Look, I got this job board, Go Jobs, and I've got traffic on it. I just want to run a test to see, will candidates, job seekers, will they use messaging as a way to communicate? And let's find out, like, just do customer research. Like, would they talk to a chatbot on a website?" And from that, we learned what the needs are from a candidate. Like, we put two live people on a chat, me and this and our friend, and we just said, "Hey, would this thing work?" And then from that, within a couple months, we built one of the first messenger chatbots in 2016, and it went viral to 103 countries in 30 days. And we're like, all right, now we know we got something. And it got shared, and literally, it's like one of the coolest things to be able to see something actually go viral. And we could see country to country. And then I think I was at a SourceCon meeting, one of the source cons. I don't know when it was, but I was talking to Dean DaCosta, and I think Dean was the influencer that we were talking about, because I had never met Dean personally, and we were sitting at the bar, and I go, "I got to tell you a story. Like, I pushed this thing out on 3 Facebook posts, and then you reposted it, and then it went to India, it went to the Philippines, it went to all these places. Do you know a whole bunch of people there?" And he goes, "Yeah, I train all those guys on recruiting." And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." And so we think he was the instigator of it going viral, because we could watch, like, the day the post went, and then it just went like boom, blew up in the different countries. It was very cool.
Nice. Yeah, network effects, powerful thing.
And you don't get to see that very often,
Right.
but it actually happened, and then find out how it happened. So it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Obviously, people are using messaging more and more. You've got, voice interaction that's becoming more popular, and that'll be, a prominent, means of communicating with AI if that's who you're talking to when you're looking for jobs. So, so there's been a lot of advancements in what we've seen, and you've obviously been at the forefront of this since you've been in the space for so long. So, I mean, I guess I'm curious about like your target audience and how you see, the adoption curve happening with, maybe moving from, maybe it was first like, just high volume hiring, hourly workers to, now, knowledge work and other types of jobs over messaging and other.
Yeah, I'll break it down in a couple different ways. So the curve we've seen is, we were manually just answering live chat just to understand what people wanted to do, which is, that's how you got to do, you got to dog food this stuff to figure out what the use cases are first. Then, we had quote unquote chatbots, which were mostly structured conversations. And even if your NLP was really smart, they were still structured. Like you didn't do and they were very tough to build. And in the enterprise, because I also built this stuff for Wells Fargo and for Kaiser Permanente, the largest healthcare, and both of those are very enterprise, got lots of tough areas they got to work from, but they were conversational designed solutions where there was a known question that could be answered. And, we've seen most everyone moving off that, although they still, are out there. These chatbots where you have to click one of 5 things and then it comes back but it spits out the same exact damn thing every time, right? And that was the annoying part why people hated chatbots. So I think we've pretty much, gotten rid of the word chatbot as if something moves into this generative space where someone could ask a question. And if you just take that question in say a web chat, move it and send it over to ChatGPT or another large language model, and it comes back with a response that's close about if they're trying to find information in your systems, etc. But it comes back with a a you know, scripted question. So you can even go into some of these chatbots on your website now. If it was, say, a career site in the HR space or employee self-service, you could probably ask the generative solution, if it's using an open AI kind of model on the back, ask it about the weather, and it'll probably answer. And if it's really smart, it'll probably say, "Hey, it's great weather in Florida, but let's get back to your application, or how can I help you with your payroll that you wanted questions about, or your paid time off?" So that's really where the benefit of this stuff is moving, is when it's in a chat conversation. But the next level that we're seeing is what people are calling these AI agents of record, or AI agents that can be assistants. Josh Bersin talks about the superpower, super workers, where we a lot of us have seen co-pilots that you can use to assist you. I know you and I have talked about using like Perplexity for search, and then ChatGPT to help do write content, and that's generative, so it's generating responses. So I think we're seeing this next level of agents come that really are assistants. And there are lots of people talking about using agentic, which I'll define that is really an autonomous, kind of like if you have ever been in a Waymo, which is pretty darn cool, but a self-driving car that is completely self-driving, like you sit in the back of a taxi with no driver, and it's actually a really amazing experience. And I'm in San Francisco, so get to experience it quite a bit. It's making decisions on your behalf because you're not driving. So I guess on its behalf. And when we talk about agentic, it's a agent or an assistant, like an employee who can make decisions and then go in different directions with it depending on the outcomes. When it comes to recruiting and HR, yes, there will be some possibilities for this, but I also believe that we're still going to be starting with somewhat scripted, uh, I'd say using more automation than AI, because we still have to talk to our applicant tracking systems that are structured data, and there's certain things they can do. And we're still gonna have to talk to our HRIS system or payroll system. And there's only, there's structured things that we'll do. So I think that's the new area that we're going to, and we're going to quickly. But it all came from, oh, hey, we have this way of communicating that doesn't require, as you and I've kind of talked about, is have to learn where the settings are in a software application that you're just learn from. And after, it was kind of interesting, after our last conversation, when we talked about it a couple of days ago, I thought about this and I go, the problem with there's been over the years, there's been a problem that HR has been saying, "Hey," and IT generally in enterprise, right? We're gonna slim down the number of tools we have because they don't want 15 different recruiting tools, and then same with everything else in the industry, in their business. And the reason for that is because the training knowledge to get somebody onboarded and using those tools is extremely time. I mean, it takes a lot of time. And then if they don't use it, you're paying for licenses. So there's a lot of waste that goes
Yeah.
on when you have these multiple software tools. And all we want is the data.
I was going to say, even if they adopt the tools, just like in the B2C space, we're probably only using like 10% of the functionality that the product teams have put so much time and effort into building, right?
Yep. And I think that what I think is going to happen is, and I'm just theorizing, it just hit me last night on a really long walk, is that you may have licenses or almost API licenses to the back end of Salesforce or something. But if I'm an SDR or if I'm in my ATS and I'm a recruiting coordinator, I may not use the full package, but I should be able to have an agent that can actually get me the info. You should be able to talk to it or type into it and say, "Hey, how many candidates do we have for this role in this position that have been graded to the level or as our different statuses?" And give me an outcome. Like, you don't have to learn the software to figure out what report to run to generate that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of changes in that regard. There's just, I mean, there's a theme about fluidity with the system, right? It's a much more dynamic, active environment and an unstructured one in the sense like you were talking about, like those old chatbots where it's just like, okay, here I am to help you with whatever it is you want, except it's got to be one of
But I
these
can only
five
do
things.
5 things.
And then if you don't phrase something right, it puts you into that endless loop. I mean, I would say certainly outside talent acquisition, I mean, that type of solution is alive and well, even at some prominent technology companies, right? And one of the things that I've also seen in those use cases is like if you do ask, first of all, if it only knows how to answer structured questions, if you ask it, if you're an AI, right? If you're a human being, shouldn't say AI,
Yep,
just are you a human being? Like it won't necessarily be able to actually answer. It'll say, I didn't understand your question or something like that, right?
exactly.
But a newer one, there's also a question of transparency. Like, is it going to respond truthfully? Is it, I don't want to say self-aware because that's a whole nother different
Yeah,
topic,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. Yep.
how will it respond if you say, are you a human being? Because I've seen, memes where people were like, "Are you human?" And it says, "Yes, of course. My name's Susan. I'm from whatever, Milwaukee." And then
Or it's
someone,
going to hallucinate and create, "I'm Bob Pulver." Like,
it was a developer who was interacting, right? So they're like, write me a Python script for da da da, da," and it went and it spit out this huge, script or whatever. So obviously, transparency is important. I guess is what I was getting at, and like so. You can deploy the most advanced technology, but if the experience is problematic, including a result of you not being transparent about when AI is being used and when it's not, then we're going to have all kinds of problems. And so I think that ties in some ways to one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about which was like candidates' use of AI. So now we have, the situation where it's not just an AI helped you with your resume, maybe it did the whole thing, which I don't find that big of a deal, depending on what kind of job you're looking for. But nonetheless, you have that, and then you have an AI generated job description, and then you have a third AI matching to see how closely they match, even though one was like literally designed to match the job description. And so you're evaluating how effective that was, right? And having nothing to do whatsoever with this candidate's, potential for the job, basically. And but now you have another sort of AI versus AI, situation where you're getting into like AI powered assessments, interview tools and things like that. And once again, candidates are in some cases trying to, augment themselves in the middle of an interview or middle of this evaluation. And this has been a pretty hot debate of late. It's frustrating to me on a number of levels. One is I love the fact that we could potentially circumvent the whole resume to job description matching cat and mouse game and get to really know the candidate through some of these tools. But now apparently we've just shifted the AI versus AI, cat and mouse game in some cases. So I think this also points to what you and have talked about before, which is, you know, are you responsible in the design and use of this technology, and are we communicating what those guidelines are to people? Because in the absence of that type of what I would describe as responsible AI, literacy, am I using it in the way that's appropriate, ethical, fair, etc. In the absence of the right controls, then we've got all kinds of other problems.
Here's a question for you, because I know you've been digging into the audits on this stuff, compliance, and the ethical side of this
Yeah,
thing. I think I have only seen one company, and not that I look for jobs very often, but I think I've only seen one company saying this is how we use AI in our recruiting process ever, and I don't remember what company it was, but it was a long time ago. So are we seeing that more and more? And I would imagine it's coming from the enterprise and the global enterprise because of EU regulations.
just from what I've seen and just anecdotal information from others, we're starting to see, at least at the initial screens of an application, exactly how AI might be used, and that it's going to potentially go to these other systems or whatever. So I've definitely seen more of that sort of fine print of late, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know it's still infrequent enough that I think I took screenshots of it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
as examples of like somebody that's like doing it right.
I think there's probably even a bigger fear from companies to even do that, even to announce it in some cases, because it's just like, why don't companies tell you that you weren't hired? Because they don't want to get sued. That's the basic number one reason they will not give you an answer.
I've had that conversation so many times, and because it's certainly not a technical challenge, right? Like you have decision making criteria, and for whatever reason, the criteria was not met, and even if you needed to sugarcoat it or come up with some structured, response, it fell into this sort of category. You could at least convey that information. But to your point, I think a lot of organizations are risk averse. Anytime you publicize anything that could be potentially misconstrued as, yielding a adverse, impact, or yeah, then you're sort of exposing yourself, which is, you know, I've seen people who have been audited, but I guess the audit results weren't that good because they decided not to publish the results of the audit, which in New York City, that's part of the New York City Local Law 144 requirement. You conduct an independent audit and then you publish the results. So if you don't publish the results, technically you're not compliant no matter what the results were.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was something I saw in the last couple of days on LinkedIn about deep fake interviews and how someone, I think, to be correct, I think I saw it from HR Brew or HR Bartender, where there's an article about a lady was interviewing a candidate and even went on screen, but then she was like, "This is really weird." And then she asked the person to raise their hand and do something like this, and they couldn't do it, and they dropped off. So it's, that's going to the far extreme. But what we do know is that, there are people that are trying to get remote jobs using somebody else to do the interview, even. Usually those are kind of on tech interviews or things like that, and somebody has to deal with those. But I think going back to the the questions about like the employers are using job descriptions that are generated from ChatGPT and whatnot. And then candidates are using other tools that are, and they're making it so easy to just take the URL of the job description and then write my resume to fit the keywords and everything. So keywords stuff it for the applicant tracking system. So then it shows up. And then now you have this dilemma of, okay, how do I do this? Because if the company doesn't have an AI matching tool, now they have 1,000 candidates with, I don't know, maybe 20%, 30% fake, or I'd say
Visionary voices, bold breakthroughs. This is Shally's Alley, where top recruiting minds spill their best kept secrets live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Raw, unfiltered conversations on sourcing, hiring, and the future of talent, where we ask the tough questions no one else will. Tune in and level up.
generated specifically for the job description. I don't know what the answer is going to be to that, except everyone's probably going to have to move more to assessments and find out someone's going to break that code on assessments and making sure that they can't be faked.
Yeah, I mean, I know the video that you're talking about. In fact, Jeremy Lyons and I were talking about it when he was on the show, and it's like, what does it say about the market and about, like, ethics that need to be instilled or reinstilled with people? I mean, it's pretty bad when you have to send, a proxy, whether it's another person. I mean, this goes back to my thought about, like whatever you do with AI, don't outsource your critical thinking, right? And offload tasks that you would offload to or outsource to another person. And you wouldn't outsource, you would outsource the resume writing, right? You would not outsource the interview. I mean, this is, yeah, it's like a, Good Will Hunting, scenario, right? When Matt Damon sends Ben Affleck to take his interview. It's just like, I don't care. You, like, didn't care about the job, and it's just like,
Yeah.
you want me to get the job?
Yeah.
You go to the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me to misrepresent yourself. I mean, it goes back to, this should be a talent acquisition is looking for a win-win, kind of relationship here, right? And so this is not like a, fake it till you make it kind of thing. I mean, this is, talk about lack of transparency and ethics. It's just, like, not appropriate. If you need an accommodation, then request the accommodation, right? Which I'm sensitive to, and I just I don't get it. And so whether it's a technical interview like you were talking about, yeah. So basically, they wanted to know that it was a real person and that you were who you said you were. So you had to move your hand in front of your face, because if it was, if it was an augmented reality kind of thing, like maybe your body, but I don't know, whatever setup you have, the it would visually show that, there was something else. Instead of a virtual background, you've got a virtual foreground, basically. And but the same thing was happening with behavioral, psychometric assessments too, right? So you're on a video call, and you're, could be a recruiter phone screen. It doesn't matter what phase it is. If you're interacting and you're being evaluated, then unless they tell you explicitly that, we're going to use AI for this exercise or whatever, or how would you use AI in the job in this scenario, then they're probably asking to evaluate you and your human brain. and and they know you're going to, well, they probably know that you're going to use AI on the job. I mean, hopefully this is a job that is incorporating AI, because, it's, sort of future focused, et cetera. But yeah, it just seems like, where does this end, right? Because, like you said, when we're going to see an increasing double-digit percentage of resumes that were customized, and they were customized to match a job description, and then they all look the same, right? And if they all look the same, then it puts undue burden on the recruiting team, and then you need alternate ways to cut through and see what differentiates people. It's like, my daughter's applying to college. You have kids in college already, right? Yeah. So it's like you can get a 4.0 or above, GPA and get almost perfect SAT scores or perfect SAT scores and have a bunch of extracurriculars and think, oh my God, Ivy League bound, right? And then you realize that there are thousands and thousands of kids that have those exact credentials. So it's like,
Criteria. Yep.
what else you got, right? What makes you you? How are you going to contribute to this organization, this community, this university? How are you, like, what's your story? Like, tell us what makes you so unique that you're not just another, book smart, you know, person. And so these are things that we need to think about when we talk about hiring for true, skills and potential.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking even on the hourly place, even though it's high volume, retention is a huge issue now. And I think that what we'll see, and even kind of developing and listening to you, my guess is it's going to be kind of weird to say, but I believe we're now in the future that Reid Hoffman built LinkedIn for, which was having third-party testimonials that are public about somebody's skill set. And that was the premise that he built LinkedIn on, was not just to have a resume with a whole bunch of like references and stuff, but make it public. And it's not about, hey, all this crap you posted, and maybe the posting stuff is helpful as well, but maybe the testimonials become a lot more important. And then like I've heard in tech interviews that the first, like, and I think the HS models are changing to do this. I'm sure most of them already do this or have some variation of this, is that if you're doing a technical review, the first thing you're doing to a candidate, and if you're not doing this already, you should be, or you could. I'm not going to tell somebody they should do anything, but ask them for their GitHub. If you're a coder, if you're not on GitHub and you're not doing public domain stuff, there may be a good reason why you're not. But if you are looking for a job, your code is going to tell us how good you are. And sure, you could probably figure out, really deep fake that too. But there's so many different ways to assess people based on public knowledge that someone would have to do a really, really, deep dive and finding ways to cover all those areas. And of course, there's people who will, but the reality is they're relying, say, on just that deep fake for a technical interview. If you just said before even getting on the interview or a recruiter spending any time with them, let's validate their GitHub.
I definitely think technical talent, any experienced technical talent should have some kind of portfolio. Yeah, whether it's a GitHub, repository, or it's some other public source. So like, have you contributed to open source projects? Have you how often has your code be reused? I mean, there's plenty of platforms that give visibility to that. If you look like TopTool and TopCoder and some of those crowdsourcing development platforms, like there's all kinds of ways you can see kind of work that people are doing. But if you want to evaluate the person or its knowledge, its knowledge work and other things, then I think LinkedIn has a lot of great content. Unfortunately, I feel like the content that could provide the most value is the least used, and that it is the conversational, unstructured, content where we don't have. It's not easy to get insights on, and that's partly by design from a LinkedIn perspective, right? Like they cut off access to mine that data, ages ago. Like in the early days of social media analytics, they basically cut off those data aggregators from the LinkedIn feed for the most part.
As they should. I mean, that's their data, and I believe in that from a business perspective. I did something that's kind of unique because we had mentioned in previous talks about perplexity, and I said, I'm going to go look myself up, and I did a search. Give me the bio for Jonathan Duarte, the founder of GoHire, and I had to give it a couple more prompts, but I was stunned. And I know why it came out correct. It was almost like entirely like, oh my gosh, I should just, this is what anyone says, hey, give me a bio. I'm like, I should have different prompts like, give me a, super quick, give me like a 2-word, a 2-line bio or a 5-line bio or a chronology. But I did something a while back on my personal website, which is really terrible. But I documented every article, every blog post, every podcast, everything I've been on. And on one page, on the About Me page, it lists links to everything. And I did that specifically for Google and the search engines to create expertise and authentic and authority. So I'm sure Perplexity got a hold of that, and it was just like, yeah, here's everything. And it listed out everything. So I think that's, from a candidate's perspective, that's one way to use these tools and the AI tools, create a small website with links of all of your stuff. And no matter, even if it's, Snapchat or Instagram and you don't want somebody on there, then don't add the link. But the reality is they're going to find it anyways at this point with all those social sides.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely used some of the digital profile software before, or like a link tree, or little profiles where you can have an aggregation point for your digital life, outside of LinkedIn. I hadn't thought about whether AI tools would get access to that, or whether they would find it and then be able to follow all those links. But that's I think that. But then even the content itself, right? Like even if you were using AI to look at a CV, if you were using something that was going beyond keyword matching, you would look for all kinds of context, or you would look for the relationship between the role, the title and the role and the organization to know, to get a better sense of actual seniority, right? Or depending on how someone described their task, you might be able to try to infer some like competency level with that skill, not just the fact they know, Python or whatever. And so I feel like there's just a lot, but even just seeing how people converse with others, how do they collaborate? Are they a healthy sort of debater, right? Are they good at explaining? Are they a good teacher or mentor? Are they good at explaining, a complex topic? I mean, you can set, unless they're an employee already, which should be part of your talent, pool, then you've got, it just seems like we're overlooking a lot of really valuable, information about what it would be like to work with this person, which the resume rarely tell you.
We've been saying for years, the resume's dead. And it truly is, because it's a marketing document. Like, there's so many great examples of why a resume doesn't work, but it's just like the SATs. Like, it was a tool that the only tool they had, although everyone's come back and said, yeah, it's a tool that actually doesn't actually determine someone's success in their freshman year in college, which is what ultimately they were trying to do. So I think now it seems like more and more people are doing social searches on people when they get into the final, if you will, the gold medal round of the candidates anyways, depending on the kind of level of the role. But I even tell my son is, you make a quick, Wix page about yourself and what you're doing. And even for hourly roles, it's going to come up. Like, it will help, because at least you're public about what you're doing. And it may not, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think these AI tools will be able to pull down, any of the Hire Easy and tools like that. These sourcing tools, I'm sure they're going to move to outside of just technical and managerial and scientific type of roles where there is a lot of documentation. They'll be able to get into the social side, but that, then becomes another ethical issue too about, are you looking at someone's Facebook posts to determine their eligibility or fit?
Yeah, no, I know some vendors will go there, and they may go there for another reason, right? Like maybe you're looking at I guess maybe part of the background check, not from a criminality, criminal record background perspective, but more
But culture fit, yeah.
well, yeah, either culture or just to understand that they're not prone to negative emotion, bullying online or like anything like that, that they would pose some kind of risk. So I just, again, like you're going out there and getting the data for perhaps other reasons, but you're right. I mean, you've got to understand what, did they give you permission to look at that? Was it public, information? I certainly don't want anyone getting access to data they're not supposed to get access to, of course. But yeah, I mean, I just, whatever however we do it, I know the resume is far from dead, and I think that's to a degree unfortunate. I mean, it is. I understand its purpose, and it's not that I don't think it has any value, but I think it's even less valuable than it was before AI could just instantly customize to match a job description, because those things aren't perfect either, and now it's just making everything look the same, and then you have the automated universal kind of apply that anything that matches my filters, just apply.
There's a deep secret in the job board world that anyone who's been around TA, talent acquisition, for a long time, like into the tech stack, might know this. But when Monster started and they were the biggest guys in the block, there were not candidates applying to jobs. They were force feeding resumes via email to the client because it was in their general area, in their category, right? Super broad based, like terrible matching. And that crap still happens today. And if you think that you put a job on Indeed or ZipRecruiter and 5 minutes later 10,000 people have seen the job, you're kidding yourself. They just matched and threw a bunch of candidates at you, and when you try to reach those candidates, they're like, wait, from what company? So this happens quite a bit. And so it's a lot of the recruiting problems we hear today really isn't about the volume. It isn't about deep fake type stuff. It's about how do you weed through the processes. So I think most of the processes that we're having problems with now are the root of the evil of recruiting, why it's broken in many cases. It's not about AI. AI might be able to, and in many cases does, like interview scheduling can, solve those problems simply. Anyone not using it right now, I just, do a gut check. Why aren't you automating something that just takes you a whole bunch of time? Or their boss should be automating your entire team to ask, hey, why aren't you automating interviews, the scheduling of them? Because it takes 20% of a recruiter's time. But the assessments, those things will help in the managerial roles and skilled knowledge worker roles. But a lot of the other things are it's straight automation. It's like, how quickly can you do something? And that has nothing to do with AI.
If people want to mass apply, fine. I think there's countermeasures that could be potentially deployed with that. But those countermeasures could be combined with something constructive, meaning as soon as you get your email acknowledgement that your application has been received, your next step can be, you could be killing two birds with one stone by saying, thank you very much for applying. We'll assume for the moment that you're human. You're a real candidate, right?
And you could even write that in there, right? Like,
and I want you to click on this link, and we want to learn a little bit more about you, Joe. And you follow that link, and so you've got your sort of CAPTCHA thing built in until somebody, of course, builds an agent that scripts that out too. But click this link. It acts as almost like a two-factor authenticator, and then you go in and you fill out. Yes, it's an AI powered. It's either a conversational thing on a web page. It could be a voice. It could be over Messenger, right? And you have a conversation. You ask that rich text thing or whatever. So if you had 1,000 people if you got 1,000 applications, like what percentage do you think would that go to? What number would that go down to if you then did even a 10-minute?
Yep, 20%. It'll drop immediately. And I think this is a really great topic because it's usually when you and I are on podcasts and things, we're talking to people who have the ability and time to talk strategy, which is usually a director or above or a manager or above. We're not talking to people who are, at the metal desk in the manufacturing facility who are, going through the day-to-day process. They're the ones who need most of the help in a lot of these cases. And this is a perfect example of one is if you're getting candidates applying via Indeed and you simply send them back a question, and it can be to a Google form. It's super fast. And you just ask, what's your name? You already have it, and their email address, and say, what's your perspective? Or, and it doesn't have to be pre-screening questions at a job level because that's way too much work for you from if you're an HR individual. But if you had one just about company culture, like, hey, our company's about this, and those are the candidates to fill it out are the ones that you should probably put at the top of your stack and respond to right away. Everyone else, like, you get to them when you get to them. But if they don't take that next step, I mean, you can send a reminder to them if you don't have enough candidates. But if you're getting that, 500 people apply to a job from Indeed or from LinkedIn, then just have some sort of autoresponder to just send them back a link. As you're saying, it's super fast, and only talk to the candidates who fill it out. Because if they're not engaged there, why are they going to be engaged sitting behind your desk getting a salary?
If you're still coming up with a scoring methodology or a stack ranking or whatever, I know a lot of systems, have that. I'm not telling you to get rid of that because that can act as a reasonable filter as well, as long as you have a human in the loop and they're checking that. But if you sort of cross-reference the ones who've completed that second step with the ones that are even a, say, 50% match on the skills and, whatever else you're looking for, years of experience, etc., you would have a much more, manageable list of real, quality candidates who seem interested enough that they did more than just mass apply, and they do exist. I mean, again, AI could come in. You could have agents, doing some of the back and forth as well on your behalf because we already have virtual assistants that can do some of that work. But you're lowering, you're still mitigating the risk, which is
And heck, if somebody is using AI to fill out that one form for you, even better. At least they know how to use AI, and they're engaged, like they want the job. Which they may get farther down the process, but I don't think we're going to see that. We're talking about nominal number of people getting through that process. Most people, if they're just doing mass applies, they're never going to fill out the form. But if it's somebody who does want to work for your company and they want to be smart about it, and they do use a generative tool to help, great. They'll still go through the process, but they get through it. I think that this will be an interesting kind of tool. I know we've been talking about AI in the recruiting space, but referrals are still the number one hires in the U.S. I mean, if your company doesn't know how to track them, or they don't, promote it that much, I think in the U.S. our referral rate for a quote, like average referral rate, is about 40%. And I actually wrote a book, which I haven't published yet, called Referrals Get Hired, which is all about the stats of this, is that you're 9 times more likely to get an interview if you came through a referral. And job boards are going to send hundreds of candidates and thousands of candidates, but very few of those are referrals. And the referrals get interviewed because they don't, it's kind of like an internal policy of like, hey, if someone's referred, we should, at least give them the give our employees the benefit of looking at their resume and then making a decision.
So you're saying 40% of all
Of
ultimate
hires.
hires are through referral?
Yep. And then you have internal hires. So now you're over, say, 65% of hires are coming from two sources, internal, and may even be more than that. So all the people who are click and apply, even mass apply, you're now going, all of you are trying to compete against less than 30% of the people who will possibly even get that job.
Yeah. So yeah, and then you factor in anything else that is weighed against you, and that you went from a a reasonable probability to like, why do I even bother type of situation. Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I will say, just on the referral piece, I mean, what you're describing, I mean, companies are obviously putting a lot of faith in their own employees, that that the referral, that the person being referred is of similar sort of intelligence, diligence, and competence.
And there's a lot of reasons for it. And in the US, we have a high referral number. In other countries, it's much lower. But I think our belief is that people will only want to refer people that they believe understand the culture. They essentially would have a mentor or somebody else is already in the company who can get them onboarded quicker. Referrals in the United States stay, I think, 3 times longer than the average employee. So from a retention standpoint, who knows? Maybe we have to go to 50% referrals.
Right. And then you have just the fact that this person doesn't work out. I mean, it's the current employee's own reputation that's also tied to it. What I don't like to see, so I'm good with all of that. What I don't like to see is these sort of haphazard programs that don't have the right incentives for the referrals in the first place. Meaning,
this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Indeed FutureWorks. Ryan and I attended the conference last year, and we created a limited series for Indeed where we talked to their customers. Great stories around TA and how they use Indeed to the max. So check it out. It's just Indeed FutureWorks 2024. You could search for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.
There's a bounty on it, which I understand. Sometimes you got roles that you want to fill quickly, and that's one way to motivate people to submit referrals. And so that one's kind of, I guess, borderline if you use it, I guess, sparingly.
A lot of companies do use them, but yeah, they're not usually big numbers, and they don't get paid. Like the person has to stay there for like 90 days and stuff like that. But there is some comp in most referral programs, but they're not big numbers.
Right. I guess my other concern, and I say this recognizing that referrals are about relationships, and your professional network is really strong and important. And I recognize that I've been the beneficiary of that. I've helped people get their jobs, and others have helped me, but it wasn't like somebody calling in a favor. It was like, I know what it's like to work with Bob. I know, whatever. So, but in that regard, and also putting my sort of, human centricity, fairness, fairness in AI kind of hat on, it's like, you still got to put the referred candidate through the same or very similar, sort of paces and assessments, et cetera, as everybody else. So it's really about how much the referring person, influences the process. If it's just getting that first interview and basically, avoiding some of the nonsense at the top of the funnel, then I'm all for it, because this person may not have otherwise gotten a response at all.
I definitely think that that's what we see in the US is it gets over that getting the pre-screen call, if you will, or getting your resume looked at.
Yeah.
Which is going to be even more important now we're talking about these AI matching tools that are all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you move through the recruiting funnel, it's just that much more important that you take that person's the referral itself and their opinion, you take that into consideration along with all the other trusted opinions across the the hiring team and whatever other factors you need to consider. So because I think we didn't get a chance to talk about like any of the DEI topics or whatever, but again, when it just comes to fairness and who's getting the opportunities or whatever, I mean, on some level, I feel like it's it's the potential like nepotism and favoritism, and it's human bias that influences a lot of things that have nothing to do with ethnicity and race and
skills and or anything. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, I mean, it's it gets into a whole nother conversation we can have another time, Jonathan, about like where does bias truly exist, and then human biases versus algorithmic bias and stuff like that. But I mean, that's what I hope, even as we think about where AI is being applied, in these interview tools and everything from in the whole talent life cycle, right? From programmatic advertising to potential applicants, all the way through how we evaluate existing employees and alumni for potential opportunities. There's bias, throughout the system, and I just think AI, wherever we use it, let's be careful. Let's make sure our solutions are thoroughly tested, hopefully audited for adverse impact, and let's make sure that we're evaluating people based on their potential to succeed in whatever roles we're looking to fill.
Yeah, I think I heard a kind of a paradigm for this is that if you can look at AI for any solution, but we are here in HR and recruiting, we're talking about for human and matching in many cases. And it's almost like a glass box. You want to be able to see what the input is and what the output is. And that's critical to understanding from a compliance standpoint. But it's also important just to know, because there's been studies, and we've known this before, is that companies that write job descriptions and they really target specific audiences through bias, not knowing, they may not be getting, they may be creating the workforce they want, or they may be creating the workforce that they don't want. And you don't really know unless you just, I guess you could probably take a job description and put it in ChatGPT and say, if I was looking for an unbiased hire, and how is this biased? Like, because it's the words, it's the verbs, it's the nouns, it's the adjectives that you use that show bias. And a lot of times you may not know it, which is because they're innate. But I think if you use ChatGPT type of tool, you might even be able to see like, wow, if I'm trying to get a great seller and I'm saying things that are more of like bro language, you might be missing a lot of great female sellers because your article sounds like you're a guy's club.
I think don't people use Textio to try to analyze that?
But if we're still talking about small companies, they're really not that engaged. They don't have bigger tools. And so again, going back to my kind of theory is it doesn't necessarily have to be a paid tool. Sometimes you just have to know that, hey, this is interesting. And if you hear the idea and see it and you try it out, and you're like, wow, that made a difference in our hiring. That's the goal for me is to educate people to understand that, behind every rock, there might be something. And like I think the things that, one of the quotes I love to live by from being an entrepreneur for now 29 years or even longer is, it's not the stuff, like we know the stuff we know the stuff that we don't know, but it's the stuff that we don't know is the stuff that's going to kill us. It's going to kill our business. It's going to kill our recruiting. It's going to have the lawyers all over us. And that's where, listen to podcasts like Bob's and just, understanding some of this stuff, but you do have to dedicate time to it.
Yeah, I appreciate the shout out there. I do think that we have to be aware of those, well, acknowledge our sort of known unknowns, like you're describing, right? Like there are things, there are limitations to my knowledge, or there are limitations to my data, and I know like I'm missing like a puzzle piece here, right? And I need a tie breaking, sort of piece of information between these two, contending candidates, right? Final candidates. And then, but it takes a certain mindset to think about like those unknown unknowns, right? Like I don't even know what I don't know. But the more you expose yourself to different use cases, different industries, different, segments of the, the labor market, and different talent pools or whatever, the more, you know, you'll be able to try to anticipate some of that to mitigate those blind spots, right? And then, there's a lot out there, right? So you can't always do it all yourself. In fact, you can't, and I wouldn't recommend you try. But that's also why, we see, I think we see a lot of emergence of like small, either local or just tight knit communities that are all like sort of in the same boat. Like in TA, I see that a lot. People trying to learn from each other. What tools have you tried? Is it okay to use this tool for sourcing? Is it okay to use this? Like, I'm not really sure. Well, this is free, so is that a bad sign? Is it limited in functionality? Does it mean that I'm the product and they're taking my data? So there's a lot of skepticism, which I understand, but if you can pull together and apply your sort of collective intelligence and your cognitive diversity, you can figure out a lot of these things. And again, that'll sort of mitigate some of the blind spots and hopefully, reveal some of those currently unknown unknowns.
Yep, exactly.
Jonathan, this has been awesome. Thanks for hanging with me so long.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts or words of wisdom for those laggards?
Well, I think it's all about just starting and having that inquisitive impetus to and someone would say, I did this on one of my podcasts with someone. I just said, just open up ChatGPT and, write, if you're not using these tools, you can just go there or Perplexity and just like, give me a recipe for dinner tonight. Like, it doesn't have to, it's not work. Don't do work related stuff. Do something fun, or, what blues artist, have I not heard of before, or that's cool. Anything that you're interested in, your hobbies, and let ChatGPT, and then just keep asking it questions, and you'll be amazed at how far you can get. And then you turn those things back to, say, your daily jobs at work, and you'll find some amazing advancements you can take care of.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I got to get in there and get curious, get your hands dirty and start interacting. And you'll also sort of be able to gauge like what it's good at. And again, don't outsource your critical thinking. And if it doesn't sound perfectly accurate, maybe double check your sources. Try enough different AI tools, see what that says.
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't publish anything that came out of a ChatGPT without editing, but it's really just about if you start using it as a playground, you'll be just blown away by things you can find out. Like, I've planned international trips over using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Awesome. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to let you go. Thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation.
You bet. Sure, we'll see each other again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.